So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to PMI Megatrends 2021. Buying into the future starts now. And this is going to be presented by Bill Richardson. Now, Bill is an internationally renowned project management coach and speaker who teaches professionals to discover their true potential. Through his work, he has helped individuals, teams, communities, and organizations to revitalize and re-envision their company's project management strategies, create streamlined processes that continue to produce consistent, significant gains. With more than 35 years of experience in project management, training, and coaching, his years of experience in the corporate arena truly come together in his role as trainer and speaker. Be prepared to come away from this presentation with a fresh perspective on project management and walk away with strategies for transforming your career to get ahead of the crowd. Now, throughout the course of the presentation, if you have questions, please do put them in the chat box or the questions box that you'll see as part of the control panel that you probably have on the right side of your screen. If all you have is a ribbon, then you'll see a small orange arrow. If you click on that arrow, your ribbon will expand to give you more room. So with all of that said, Bill, I'll turn it over to you, and I'm sure this is going to be an interesting conversation.
Thank you, Reg. Reg, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you loud and clear, Bill.
So welcome, everybody. My name is Bill Richardson, as Reg sort of outlined in my bio, but I'd like to bring a couple of things into focus in this slide here. I've had 50 years of business experience, and both domestic and international. And really what I specialize in is bringing soft skills to life. Soft skills really are the way that you get a return on investment for your hard skills. And it's something that I've been focused on for a number of years. And it ties very nicely into the subject of today's webinar, which is megatrends. But there are some things that need to change for us to learn and adapt. My philosophy is never panic, never quit, because I believe if something doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. And part of the advantages of the new world and what's going on, which I'm going to talk about today, is that fact that it does challenge us. And that's where growth comes in the process. My first book was Thinking on Purpose. And really the focus I have right now is helping professionals in the last third of their life make it their best third. Now, it doesn't mean I'm excluding people that are 50 and under, but basically I'm beginning to help people do exactly what we're going to talk about today with this Megatrends 2021 applies to the great transformational shift that's happening from a generational point of view, which I'll cover in more detail as we go through this. My favorite quote on this is from Gibran. Our anxiety does not come from thinking about the future, but from wanting to control it. Now, Gibran's insight here is right on the money for what we're going to talk about today, because as we talk about the future, and even Megatrends 21, you could go into 2030, there is a future aspect of this that we need to talk about, which we're going to do today. The reason that Gibran had it right in terms of how our mind and brain sort of respond to the future and our desire to control that comes from a very simple process that revolves around the map is not the territory. This is an important concept for communication. It's an important aspect of coaching, and certainly a very important part of leadership. Now, just to refresh everybody's memory here, a map is really nothing more than a simplified representation of something. My wife and I, own a motorhome, and we do a lot of motorhoming, and we go to a campground, a KOA, And the map that you get when you sort of sign up or online is not the territory when you actually get there. It doesn't look the same. It may look good in the map, but it doesn't always look good, in real life. That's sort of an example of the map is not the territory. So what is significant, though, we begin to make mental models. And the brain, think of your brain as a categorization system, a pattern recognition system. And a nature of the brain that is so instructive in this space is this notion of binary thinking. I'm just putting a note in the chat, binary thinking. So you see it everywhere, that we are really hardwired to think in a binary way. So, it's things like right and wrong, the idea of us versus them, etc. We just think in a binary way, which why I want to talk to you today about we need to change the way we look at the future. So if the map is not the territory, what is? And that's pretty well the subject of what I'm going to be talking about today in this webinar. Now, also remember that when we think we know the map of the territory and we think that is the territory, you can imagine, what might happen. So those of you in the audience, can you just send me a chat? What do you think happens when the map in your head is not accurate? Late, if you're there, just send a quick chat. What happens if the map in your head is not accurate? And if you're there, Late, just do a quick comment. That would be great. Or anybody else that's joined us in the process. Late, I'll keep an eye on the chat. So let's talk about disconnects and confusion from Reg. That's good. So from a learning map, roadmap today, first of all, I want to talk about VUCA. VUCA is a term that's emerged about 15 years ago. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. We're going to talk about how that's affecting the map in the process. I want to raise your awareness of the 5 megatrends that are probably going to shape your life. And PMI has done a really good job of summarizing those megatrends. The third thing is I want you to think about the multipliers that are really enabling or driving the whole idea of making change, but for good reasons in the process. And there's ecosystems. I need you to start embracing the concept of ecosystems. What that means is that things don't operate on their own. They are operating in a symbiotic relationship with their environment. And those ecosystems are one of the ways that we need to think differently about the future. I want you to also begin to understand there are 3 capabilities we're going to talk about that you must bring with you into the future. And just to give you, a quick word on those, one of those is a way of working. Our way of working needs to adjust. Another one that I'm going to be talking to you about is the whole notion of a business acumen. Business acumen is emerging as a must-have aspect in your talent repertoire to really work in a company effectively because things are moving so fast. And the third one that I'll talk about is all about what's referred to as the power skills. And those power skills are the soft skills in the process. So at the end of today, I'm going to get to this infamous map you see on this screen with sort of the rationale and the answer to the question, so how does the future start now in the process? So let's revisit VUCA. You probably have heard this before in other places, and VUCA is really an expression of the environment. And the environment is an aspect of our being, our area, or what we perceive, and it will always win. It will constantly shape us. In fact, your brain is really nothing more than an organ that makes sense of your reality through the environment. What you see, what you smell, what you taste, etc. is formulated, processed, and played back to you in your inner self, your inner brain of reality. If you looked inside your brain, it would be dark. There is no motion picture playing in the back of the screen of your brain, of what you see. So VUCA has become the way of looking at why change is so difficult. So the environment is really driving you to make changes that are really, really important, but in an unpredictable and uncontrolled way. It's called volatility. It's like having a stock portfolio. One day you're making money, the next day you may not. You often don't sell that portfolio because you know it'll change over time. So you wait it out, and that's how a lot of investors deal with volatility. Uncertainty is a major part of the issues in the world today. We don't know what's going to happen next, and COVID has been an exemplar of all that. And I'm going to talk about, in fact, COVID as one of the 5 megatrends in today's discussions. Now, as a project manager, if you do that, have that professional designation or do that, you have a special way of dealing with uncertainty. It's called risk management, and that makes a dramatic difference. Complexity is facing everybody, whether it's technology, whether it's just trying to understand how the medicine that's being applied to deal with COVID, the vaccine and the vaccine processes, very, very complex. And understanding those interdependencies is very important. In the project management world, we do that through a work breakdown structure. Ambiguity is probably the big A here, because it is the one. We don't know what's going to happen next. Now, we never did, but because things are moving so fast now, we have to be much more nimble, much more agile in both the way we learn and the way we act. So the environment is forcing us to do things in an environment that is outside our expertise in the process, which is the definition of ambiguity. The VUCA itself is not really a problem, except it affects the way that we react, or rather respond, to the environment. This chart, this is a sort of a way of looking at the relationship between your performance and the degree of arousal that you have experienced or will experience in the process. So on the left-hand side of this sheet, if you can see where my cursor is, too much or too little arousal, which is the scientific term for stress, is not enough to really get you going. So you're laid back, you're too relaxed, and you're not really, quote, engaged. So performance is not where it might be. On the other end of the extreme, it is worse, because you're now anxious, you're panicking, you're stressed, because the arousal, the stress levels are high, too much VUCA, too many demands from my boss, not enough sleep, etc. In the middle is where we want to be. We all want to perform at our best. We want to find that optimum zone, and that optimum zone, is at the top of the performance rung and pretty much in the middle of the level of arousal or stress. And finding that sweet spot is what leadership is about. It's about personal performance, in that process. Everybody's optimum zone has a different width. Some people have a small width, and some people have a wider width, depending on their personality, depending on how they view stress, etc. in the process. So suffice it to say that the whole thing I'm talking about today is giving you strategies and helping you understand how you can stay in your best performance zone, your optimum zone in the process. Now, the best laid plans here, you can have a plan that says, I'm going to stay in this optimum zone, etc. But I'm going to talk to you today about 5 trends that have happened called disruptors that pretty much threw a monkey wrench in everybody working in their optimum zone in the process. PMI has done a very good job, and I highly recommend you download the Megatrends 2021 article. It's about 18 pages actually from PMI. I came across this a few months ago when I was doing some work for a client who was trying to decide, should they be investing in PgMP, which is a program management designation, or should they be investing in Agile, ACP, or whatever through PMI? And through that analysis and through the work, we laid out what was the preferred strategy. And near the end of the presentation today, I'll share with you what we did with that company, major company worldwide. But suffice it to say that there are 5 global trends. There's probably 35 global trends, but these are 5 that, through the research of PMI, that came up to them is critical. COVID-19 probably needs no introduction. It is obviously a disruptor and an exacerbator of discontent. Whether you have kids, whether you have elderly people in your house, it has driven, mercilessly us towards being more careful, being fearful for our lives, being fearful for our loved ones. It has caused untold impact on people from the point of view of mental health, and it will continue to do so. If you look at Megatrends 21 from next year, 5 years down the way, are we going back into the office or not? If we do, what are going to be the precautions? Will I be able to go into that office without my mask, etc.? So COVID-19 it tops the list of the one that is going to continue to shape and reshape the whole process. And part of my message here for all of you is to not be paralyzed by these factors, but be energized. And I'll come back to that as we go through this. Number 2 on the hit list is climate change. Now, you might argue that, well, yeah, it's been around for a long time, but it's probably the biggest existential threat to us as a society. And the amount of money, the amount of effort, the amount of manpower, the amount of brain power that is going to be necessary, to come through this is enormous. And the idea now is, if you think climate is not going to be something you're going to have to deal with, and your kid's going to have to deal with it maybe 100 years from now, you'd be sadly mistaken. So just like coronavirus, the climate crisis is real and it will persist, and it's going to take a whole bunch of consolidated effort to respond effectively to it. The third one is interesting. It's about the civil, civic, and equality movements that are happening in the world here. Racism that you may come across, whether it's in North America or it exists in Europe as well. The whole idea of equality, of people being treated equally, is emerging now as a major factor in how we recruit people, how we treat people, and organizations now have to be much more aware of what happens when an organization doesn't live up to its commitments. It could be a gender gap, it could be a pay gap, it could be something racially in play. And so you as a professional need to be very much aware of, as I said earlier, ways of working, the power skills, the soft skills, and business acumen about how all this ties together in the process. I should add one more thing about that. If you pay attention in the last year to not only just COVID, but the mass demonstrations for racial injustice, or mass demonstrations for even some of the aspects of having to wear a mask or not, bring this to the fore. Number 4 is, I know it's 4 on the list, but it is a big one. It is what I call the great generational shift. Things are moving at supersonic speed in this place. And think of it, the number of generational cohorts in play now is at least 5. And the generational shift that's happening is the most recent generational addition to the environment is called Gen Z. Gen Zs were born between 1996 and 2012. They are the next layer after millennials. Now, the big shift that's happening is the millennials are moving through their human life cycle, and I'm a student of the human life cycle. And as you move through your human life cycle, you may be called the millennials because of how you came into the world around in your 20s. That was the time that shaped you. You're going to move through the whole human life cycle and get to your 70s and your 80s, etc. in the process. Well, the shifting dynamics are changing even the way that we lead. So now the millennials are moving into leadership positions. Gen Xers, who were born between 1962 and 1980, they're moving into senior leadership roles. Baby boomers are retiring. That seems like, okay, fine, Bill, we do that. That's part of the way things work. But what's happened as a result of that is the baby boomers have what is called tacit knowledge. Tacit knowledge is really the information that people learn through experience. You can't get it from a book, and they're walking out the door with this in the process. So what's happening is we're reducing our headcounts perhaps, but we're also reducing our salaries because the people coming into the workforce now, either millennials or whatever, are paid less money, which kind of makes sense. So the globalizational shift that's happening is all this tacit knowledge is leaving the workforce. The Gen Zs are pushing at the other end, and in between is the millennials and the Gen Xers moving up to senior leadership roles. Well, here's something to think about. The Gen Zs, which are basically the kids, if you will, they're roughly 23 right now, born between 1996 and 2012. 17% of the Gen Z kids in the marketplace today have already started a retirement fund. So think about that. Gen Zs have already started a retirement savings plan for their retirement in 80 years from now. Also, that group doesn't care about having ping pong tables in the cafeteria. What they care about is learning, growth, and they really care about strong, solid leadership. That's what they're looking for in the process. So these kids are coming along, pushing the flow. The millennials are moving into leadership positions with their way of seeing the world, and that's creating gigantic shifts in how we lead, how we think, and how we compensate people in the process. And lastly, of course, number 5 is the mainstream AI. Artificial intelligence is coming. It's here. It's emerging. And a question you might want to think about, who's going to be the leaders of the AI functions in the future? So figuring out how do you manage an AI device and how do you make that work is a big part of how all this comes together. So these could keep you up at night because they are major issues in the process, but I'd like you to keep coming back to the idea to be energized by this and not paralyzed by that. And I'm going to give you some insights on how to do that in the process. So I'm just curious. I'm not sure how many folks are on the line here, but what I'd like to do here is to ask anybody to put a chat. Oops, we'll go back one here. Is which one of these devices really, or these megatrends really keeps you up at night? Is it COVID? Is it climate? Is it equality movements? Is it the global shift in the generational cohorts, or is it AI? Just send me a quick chat. Which one do you think it is? Okay, so it's one person in Reg. Okay, I'm going to keep going here in the interest of time. So let's talk about the multipliers. A multiplier is by definition what it says. It enables, it accelerates where things are going with these megatrends. So these megatrends that we just talked about are targeted by these three things. So first of all is the social impact and the projects that run that and cause that need to be a strategic priority. It's important that if you think about what's going on, if I go back to 2 slides here, at the heart of this, the civic, the civil, and the equality movements are really big factors. And that's where the workforce is going to come from. That's where the Gen Z kids are coming through. And guess what? Gen Z is going to be followed by what's going to be called the C generation. And that C generation is going to be called the C generation because it's the COVID generation. It's the kids that are beginning to come on stream in the age of COVID in the process. So those social projects, being sensitive to that, and things like pipelines and different things we do to the environment have a really big draw for people, younger people, who are coming into the workforce, and they're going to object with indiscriminate and reckless destruction of the land or the climate or whatever in the process. Another multiplier in this is partnering ecosystems and getting people in play. A good example of this, I think all of you will recognize, is AstraZeneca and Oxford University where we're in the throes of this whole pandemic, work together collaboratively to come up with a way of helping this work in the process. And there was even teaming up between the Moderna people to help the process. So you can see those partnerships in a big ecosystem called the medical world to come up with a solution that the whole world needs. It wasn't just what the United States needed or Canada needed, it was for the whole world. And number 3, we got to rethink the relationships with our stakeholders. In fact, they're really more shareholders than they are stakeholders in the process. And the idea now is share, discover, and align. We need to have a different way of connecting with them. Figuring out what they value and need is really high in the list, because as we move through the generational shifting here, there is a big shift towards a different era of leader. Basically, Gen X and the emerging groups from the one before them, the millennials. And what's changing there is the way of communicating, was expected in the process. And it's no longer successful anymore, to have a very diminishing kind of leadership style. The leadership styles need to be more collaborative, more based on a multiplier strategy, and revolve around literally paying attention to what people value and need in the process. So how your projects, what kind of projects you raise, what the project approach might be, and the team and the configuration of those teams begins to bring these multipliers to life. Now, the ecosystem of change makers that emerges in the world of what PMI foresees happening is literally the example of an ecosystem. In other words, in these ecosystems, there's new ways of working that must be responded to. Now, Agile is part of that. Letting go of the old way, starting with a new way, is a whole set by itself. The power skills are the power skills because they are the soft skills. They are the skills around share and discover and connect. They're not the skills around yell and tell, etc. in the process. So yelling and telling is out, share and discover is in. So those power skills need to emerge. And I'm going to talk about each of those in a moment. And business acumen, I'm a banker. I spent 35 years in the banking business, had 38 jobs in 35 years. Understanding the business has never been more important than now. and understanding the drivers, understanding the key factors here in play, because each one of these has a price tag, and we need to know what that return on investment is, and be demonstrating to the world that you're cognizant of the return on investment. Let's talk a bit about new ways of working. You probably have heard of Agile, and Waterfall are the two ends of the what I talked earlier about, this binary thinking. Well, the binary thinking is going to is going to be taken over by a different way of doing things. And you may have heard now a new term that is emerging in PMI called disciplined agile, which begins to look at agile as a sort of an umbrella of a way of being iterative and incremental. But under that umbrella called agile, there are a whole host of ways that you can achieve that iterativeness or that incrementalness, if you will. Agile, i.e. Scrum, being just one of them. So hybrid methodologies, AI-driven tools, micro-learning apps, just-in-time learning, all that is emerging in the process. I'm doing a lot of work right now with a major company in the States, helping them begin to make sense of how are they going to make peace between the two poles. There's the agile camp, and then there's the waterfall camp. And this organization is making a concerted effort to change the wording, even in their project management lifecycle documentation. It's called ways of working, and it all comes under that umbrella, ways of working. The power skills are important because power skills have now greater influence than they used to have. And what I love about what PMI has done is the leverage comes from the fact that those skills make a big difference in terms of share, discover, and align kind of behavior. So collaborative leadership, a good example of how those skills come to play. Collaborative, I would say collaborative capital in an organization is critical. That collaborative capital comes to life when you have collaborative leadership that fosters it, nurtures it, and actually takes care of it. Empathy voice for the customer. It is now, from a power skill point of view, empathy is a soft skill, but it's a power skill. Being able to see their world, understanding their voice. That voice could also be applied to the employee as well. For example, sometimes in the past, period of business growth in the 1900s and early 2020s, 2000, began to shift away from, well, just do what the customer wants and who cares about anybody else. And there was a tendency to sort of sacrifice the voice of the employee for the voice of the customer. Now, I think that's changing. I think the new power skill is you gotta think of your employees as equity in your company, not assets. Assets, they will deplete. They will over time be amortized down in the process. So think of your employees as equity, which grows, which gets more valuable as you invest in them. Lastly, the trust relationships, building those trust relationships, maintaining those trust relationships. I do a lot of work with clients right now around their ability to connect with people and begin to build those trusting relationships and understand what the word trust means and how that plays. Because basically people judge you in three ways, in three elements. The first thing, they look at you and they ask themselves, is your intent worthy? In other words, are you here for my benefit or are you just here for your benefit? They next ask themselves, do you interact with me in a warm and inviting or connecting or equal kind of way? And the third thing they ask themselves are you competent? So first question is, do you have worthy intent? Second question is, do you treat me, can we connect? And the third question is, are you competent in that process? So power skills are the soft skills, and they will be the leverage points for your hard skills in the process. Business acumen, third part of this, very critical, because it's not just knowing about how the business makes money. It's a well-rounded set of capabilities. That means you understand you actually read the annual report. Everywhere I go in the world, I ask the question of my students, especially leadership students, have you read the annual report for your company? Generally, the answer is, I'd say 9 out of 10 people will say, well, not really. I sort of look at the quarterly summary that's published by the organization. I'd recommend all of you on this call begin to read the annual report. So you don't only want to understand your role, you want to understand your role and how it fits into the ecosystem, if you will, in the process. And what's going to happen in the future is now more important than ever, because we are now on notice that it's pivot and adapt, and you're not going to have a lot of time to study a book for for 10 days or 20 days or whatever. You need to have what's called learning agility in the process to make this work. So let me bring this back, and my call to action for all of you. First of all, I need you to commence a learning process about VUCA. Become comfortable with VUCA. The idea is it should energize you and not paralyze you in the process. The second call to action is go deeper on these megatrends. I'd like you to look at the article that was published by PMI and begin that that process of understanding that. It's well written in the process. Number 3 is embrace these multipliers. These 3 multipliers, that come back to this. And just to refresh your memory, those multipliers, one is that strategic priority of social impact, very key in the process. Innovative partnership would be the second trend that you need to really think about, and how that plays out in the process. And lastly, relationships. The whole ecosystem of relationships becomes how you make good in the world here. The fourth one is, and my apologies, my new Apple mouse is not so effective. Embrace the concept of these ecosystems in the change maker territory. And those ecosystems make a difference in the process, and that ties nicely into the new capabilities we need. And to refresh your memory, those three capabilities are: one, the whole idea of power skills. Power skills are the new normal. They are the soft skills that have a hard impact. The second one would be business acumen in the process. And the big one, the one that really makes the difference, is it's new ways of working. Be a disciple of that, understand it, be learning agile in how you apply them in the process. And lastly, these new capabilities, make a pledge to be part of the solution and not the problem. The future starts now when you start being the future in terms of the solution and not the problem. Because what I'd like to leave you with here is your personal brand is your promise of value delivery. It's your uniqueness that shines through. It's how you show up. It's what you stand for. It's what you're known for. It's what you're capable of becoming here. And it's how you should measure your progress. That is my personal brand. Am I showing up in a way that shows well for my company? That my strength of my convictions, what I believe to be valuable and important, and am I constantly learning and growing in the process? And it comes down to the question: Are you going to be paralyzed by what's going on in the current megatrend world, even up to 2030? Or are you going to be energized? And I think you want to be known as somebody in the organization who is energized for this, stand for doing things in the right way, and ultimately somebody who continually grows and learns. Lastly, before you do any of these power skills, I want you to think before you speak. The T stands for, is it true? The whole new world is calling for social connection, interpersonal skills, and this think before you speak is going to be the grease that enables that. Is it true what you're about to say? Truth is relative to perspective. Is it helpful about what you're about to say? Is this feedback I'm giving, is it being done in the kindness or friendliness, or why am I giving it? The I is about inspiring. You want to inspire people, you just don't want to motivate them. We need inspirational leaders in this new world. And lastly, or thirdly, fourthly, rather than this, is the whole idea, is it really necessary to say what I'm about to say to this person? Is it something that's going to add value or not? And lastly, is it kind? Kindness is critical. Long after people forget your words, they will remember how you made them feel. Kindness is super critical in that social world that we talked about, in that world of connecting with people in the process. Think before you speak. Thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure. Let's open this up for questions. I'd be happy to answer them if anybody has any.
So, Bill, I have a question for you.
Sure.
And it may be beyond the scope of a brief conversation like this, but when we think of those 5 megatrends, it seems to me that really, and I don't have a word for this, but those megatrends are so well intertwined that in fact, they're really, it seems to me, perhaps streams within a unitrend or a single trend that is composed of a number of threads. What do you think?
I think it's a good observation. What I would say is those 5 megatrends actually form their own ecosystem, and they are all intertwined. And if you thought about that whole concept at a higher level, you could use that word as an ecosystem, and they've become an ecosystem because COVID sort of was sprung on us. But when you talk about the movements, the issues with equality and civic unrest, et cetera, they've all been a sort of a factor of the environment. And it's difficult to tell which one of the 5 has been the igniter of this whole ecosystem of challenge. I would call COVID the one that has been the igniter. And I think that the other 4 have been there in various forms for a long time. It's the overwhelming inertia that was sitting there that COVID came along and changed, that's caused them all to be A, connected, and B, formidable in terms of how we respond to them.
Thank you. This was an interesting presentation, and I certainly picked up a couple things.